Around 2 years ago, I debuted this channel with this, my USS Warthog. This featured operational suspension, steering, and a modular rear that could be swapped out. And this was great, and I was pretty happy with it at the time. But as time went on and I further developed my mock designing skills and methods, I thought that it could be better. So, in this video I'm going to cover this 4th generation design of my N12 Warthog, how it's improved, and for the first time, there are instructions available for this mock. But before I get into that, let's get into the build. So if there's any vehicle in the Halo universe that you'd want to be accurate and generally spot on, it's got to be the Warthog. I mean, it's kind of like the X-Wing of the Halo universe. So, out of all my older MOCs needing to be revisited, this had to be the first. Although, the Hornet especially is looking a little long in the tooth. So to properly appreciate this new version, I feel like you need to go back and look at the old version to see what's changed. I hope that you can excuse the lack of wheels on this one. I've torn off a few parts as I just couldn't wait to upgrade my fleet of Warthogs. So let's cover features first. In this regard, the two versions are almost identical. They both have front and rear suspension that is sprung using an elastic band. Whilst they are connected, they include a steering rod to allow for the appearance of front and rear steering, which makes it look far more dynamic. The seats and seating space are similar and both feature movable steering columns. Finally, both of these versions feature a modular rear assembly, although this is where they do begin to differ. Rather than using a single pin and stud mechanism on the older version, the stud attachment has been moved to the underside, meaning that swapping out the rear segments is a much more simple task, although this does come at the cost of a little less sturdiness. In fact, whilst they might look similar initially, the entire central chassis monocoque segment uses a radically different design. My old MOC always looked a bit too tall, meaning that it seemed to tower over the figures more than a normal Warthog would. However, this newer design much more closely follows the build flow of the Warthog instead of using a typical stepped plate construction, giving greater interior space and design accuracy. Although this is at the cost of design complexity and rigidity. For me, this was 100% worth it, as it allowed me to reflect more of the texture and detail of the in-game model. The last thing this new version truly borrowed from the previous version is the hood design. This was just unbeatable to me, and I really can't think of how I'd start to improve on the shaping or the texture, so I copied it pretty much verbatim from the old MOC. So, what's new and improved? Well, as I said, the entire chassis is about 1 to 2 plates shorter. This might not seem like much, but it really adds extra proportion to the design, which makes a big difference to my eye. Another big goal for a new MOC was to more closely attempt to follow the external lines of the in-game model. If you look at the Warthog in Halo 3, you can see that the lines flow with the bodywork as they move down, along, and back up again. The previous design, and most designs, really miss this detail, so achieving this makes it look that much better. Also, constructing the MOC in this way allows the lower mudguard segment to flow nicely as well, further adding to the look. The roll bar section has also received a major makeover. Gone are the loose, free-moving clip segments, which are replaced by more rounded beams that properly attach all members to each other. This gives the overhead bar a rigidity, meaning you can far more safely lift the MOC by this beam. The new design is a little more intricate though, so you do need to have some more patience during assembly, and although it is more secure, I wouldn't get too carried away with it. Finally, there's the underside. And this is where some of the biggest changes to the whole Warthog happened. When I first started building, I was mostly content to just tile off the bottom and add a few detail elements and call it a day. Well, with this new version, I went to every length I could to create a more faithful looking design. I especially wanted to emulate the triangular detail at the very bottom, along with much more closely following the smooth slope sections either side of the passenger compartment. The rear underside has had a massive facelift, with extra tiling and elements, which means no more understuds being visible, which makes the MOC feel more polished as a whole. So I'm not going to go into detail about Mega's previous versions, as I've already done that before, but instead I'm just going to compare it with the body of Mega's most recent and theoretically most advanced M12 design, the Red Team Charge set. Now please excuse the stripped back nature of this design, as I have borrowed a few parts for other things, but it still gives you an idea. I'm just not a big fan of this design in general, and I think it looks especially bad on the side with such little coverage for the passengers, and I'm sure you already know my feelings about the colour in general. The difference is just even more stark when you turn it over, with basically no thought being put into making the underside representative at all. I know it's technically a different Warthog variant, but I have a Fleetcon Warthog here just to compare the three directly against each other. So when building my MOCs, I now typically have this orthographic printout that scales with my set USS 1:38 scale. And you can see that when I put my MOC on this, it's pretty much bang on in all regards. In comparison, the Mega version just looks simultaneously too thin and too tall at the same time, and I've always thought that in general it just looks off. All this isn't to say that this design features no drawbacks whatsoever. Especially compared to the Red Team Charge set, it's fragile. Now, my design philosophy has always been to prioritize detail and features until the design gets so fragile that it becomes impossible and frustrating to handle. Now, this is perceptive, so your mileage may vary, but you can definitely easily move this MOC around, pick it up, roll it, without having to worry about anything falling apart. However, if you have a tendency to apply a lot of pressure or grab it tightly, then absolutely elements of this can easily misalign and break. Because the front and rear don't follow typical connections, they aren't the most rigid and won't always stay parallel to the body. This deformation is typically minor though. Finally, I want to cover some different variants and colour combinations of this MOC. Because the rear is modular, you can of course swap out the rears to create various vehicle disciplines. So you can just swap out the turrets, or alternatively you can swap out the whole rear section for a troop carrier variant or any other modular element that you can imagine and build yourself. You might also notice that this troop carrier version also has a different tusk layout. I've created two different sub-designs that you can choose to build depending on preference and part availability. In fact, I've also done this for the steering arms below as well, although the alternate version is definitely inferior, but it still works and it uses more available elements. I've also built multiple variants of this Warthog design. So you have so far been seeing the typical black and dark green version that I always associate with the Halo Reach design, but I've also built up a grey and dark green, which I associate with the Halo 3 UNSC colour palette, and this one is my personal favourite, despite it missing some necessary grey elements to the substructure. So we also have the silver variant of the design using the black chassis. This one looks pretty cool and gives off an unconventional, almost unpainted appearance, like it's straight out the factory. Whilst I could get hold of most of the silver elements, I did have to alter the design of the front side section, as not all the needed parts were available to me. If you can get the parts though, then this is the beauty of this design. Most of it is actually constructed out of black elements. This makes colour swapping the parts relatively easy, so long as you can get hold of the right ones. If only Mega had a part picker or bricklink, and you'd be able to relatively easily swap out a whole bunch of colours and make a bunch of combinations. And if you're interested to see what pieces you might need to build this MOC, then look at the parts list page of my site, re-forger.com. And that brings me to instructions. Yes, instructions are now available for this on my store at re-forger.com. These are the first instructions that I'm selling, and you can buy two variants. You can buy instructions for the base Warthog model featured in this video. I've also included two sets of mini instructions for alternative tusk and steering arm builds. You can also buy the Warthog Plus Extras pack. In addition to everything in the base version, this includes instructions for my previous version of the Warthog as well, instructions for the troop bay modular rear, and two styles of Gorse turret. Maybe you've got a big collection and are wanting something more accurate, or maybe you want to get into Mega MOC making. Well, now's a great time to do it, as lots of people are selling up their collection, meaning you can more easily get your hands on the pieces you need to make this. You can find a full part breakdown on my website, so you can check out what you need to obtain before buying. Although you can definitely get away with fewer of some of the harder to obtain parts if you're okay with less detail. I'll have to leave that to you though, as it will depend person to person. Oh, and one other thing. I've got another set of free instructions available in my store. This is a little LAAT gun emplacement that you might recognise from Halo ODST. It's not the most elegant of builds and requires a few rarer pieces, but I think it's pretty neat, and it'll give you a great idea for the standard of my instructions if you're curious about buying any of my other builds. It might not seem like it, but I'm currently attempting to really ramp up the channel, hopefully with video timelines, but absolutely with quality. So it would be massively appreciated if you could consider helping me out by getting some of these instructions, if you're interested. These MOCs take weeks of time to develop, and these are professional style CAD generated instructions. These require me to individually model all the parts and then plug it into a software to make these instructions, so I hope the effort's worth it. Otherwise, helping me out by subbing, liking, or maybe consider watching my first video that I debuted the channel with here, where I covered the previous version of the Warthog. So, what do you think? Do you prefer this new variant, and are you planning to build one yourself? And that's it for this one. I'm Reforger, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.